Hi, welcome to valuationpodcast.com, a podcast and video series about all things related to business and valuation. My name is Melissa Gragg, and I'm a financial mediator and business valuation expert in St. Louis. And today I'm speaking with Emily Bouchard. She's a family transition specialist, an author, speaker, and we're talking about a little bit more about emotional things, trust, but today's topic is before the sale, building trust around family, money, and the next generation. Welcome, Emily. How are you?
Oh, great. Great to be here, Melissa. Thanks.
Well, this is a great discussion because for the most part, we typically talk about the numbers, the money, the valuations, what are we going to sell for? But as we were talking about this with you, there's a lot when we're talking about founder companies, right? Family companies that have been in the same hands for generations, maybe moving along those generations. There's a lot of emotions behind it. There's a lot of trust. There's a lot of transparency. There's a lot of conversations because you're not just business owners, you're family members. And I think that there is some, I can imagine there's some difficulties in those discussions and such, but maybe you should kind of lead us off. Like, where has your work kind of led you to have an understanding of the family dynamic in not only selling their company, but even transitioning to the next generation?
Oh, there's so much there. I mean, for 20 years of working with families of every shape and size, the biggest one that is so important to address right out the gate is the degree of identity the family feels with the business, right? So it's whether you're going to be having a liquidity event and selling it, or whether you're going to be keeping it within the family lineage. Whatever it is, it's really about what is the purpose of this business? How has it served the family? And what does it mean to transition it in a different way? It's a major issue for people that are the founders. It's their baby. It's something that they have nurtured and grown and they care so much about. And who they are in the world is a big part of their identity is the business, the enterprise they built, the role that they have. And as they look at, oh, we need to do some significant planning here for financial reasons, right? Taxes and retirement, or if like they need to make sure that if they're never going to retire even, but they also want to make sure that they hand over the reins in a certain way and have a different role to play, whatever it might be, that they have a really good sense of what's their legacy, what is it they want to be remembered for, known for, and what is it that where they want to leave their mark that's beyond their role in the business, right? So who are they in the world and who are they to their family? And so that identity piece is one of the biggest ones for the family. And especially if there's this conversation that's been happening around transitioning leadership, transitioning ownership, but then the roles aren't really clear. That's the other one that gets very confusing for families and where you really need to develop a lot of trust and communication. If you have done different structures like trusts and transitioning ownership for tax purposes at a certain valuation, what does it mean to be an owner? And what does it mean if you're an owner of the business, but you actually have no say, you're not involved? And then, you see some people that are working in the business that are getting perks by being in the business, but you don't. So there's a fair versus equal thing that happens. And there's also this role clarification that needs to happen. And all these things create these trust pain points within families. Like, can I trust that my brother will have my back the same way that I know my father has my back, or if he's taking over, right? So there's all these different areas where this interface between the money and what this business is doing for the family and the trust in terms of who's doing what, how. And I love that you said transparency because we often talk about that. But the other thing about these transitions are who do you tell? When do you tell? How do you include? To what degree do people have input and say, be consulted or just be informed? And then how do you trust that people are going to do the right thing with the information that they have?
Yeah. And there's a lot of, when we typically talk about transitions, it's about the dollar. it's about, and even when people contact us, right? They're like, oh, I want to sell my business, or I want to, gift it to the next generation, or no, they're going to buy me out, right? Things like that. But a lot of times we get further down the transaction and there's a ton of emotions, and we don't talk about that because we're always talking about the money. But the fact of the matter is, there's a lot that goes in, and maybe you can tell us a little bit more about it because, we're seeing a lot of baby boomers. We're seeing a lot of them stay further in the business. There's a lot of emotion tied to, like, I don't know what I'm going to do with myself, and also I hear them kind of saying, well, you're not going to decide how this is, like, I'm going to decide how this is. You also talk a lot about the legacy, not just for the company, but the charitable giving. And so
Mhm.
talk about some of the emotion around these events, even transitioning to family members that you're seeing in these founder companies.
Oh, yeah, you cannot not have emotion, right? Because there's so much at stake, and anytime there's money involved, there's going to be emotion. Things from the past that have never been resolved. I work with families, and I'll interview everybody, and I'll hear about all these different resentments and things that happened years ago, and especially if there's certain members of the family that were more cultivated to be in the business, where others were kind of discouraged from it, or maybe so. And so that fair versus equal can lead to a lot of resentment. And I don't come in and say we're going to address all these unresolved issues. It's more about, we need a new way of communicating and respecting and honoring everybody for your different skills, talents, abilities, and valuing each other and what you bring to having this sustaining business that's made such a difference for the family. And these past things, what do we need to do to shift the orientation and the narrative going forward so that you have measurable trust with each other, so you can really trust that you are on the same page? And the main reason is, do we care about the same things? Do you care about what I care about? If there's like, we're going to keep investing money in the business and we're not going to do any distributions this year, and then you see that that person that said that then is driving a brand new truck or is doing a remodel in their home, it's like, wait a second, was that sincere? Were they actually honestly saying what's so, or are they just siphoning to benefit themselves, right? It always, presumptions will go to the worst case scenarios. So that transparency is key. And the best way to start the conversations around these emotions is to storytell, to really dive into the stories behind the business. Like,
Mm.
making sure that all the generations, the grandchildren, the kids, all are on the same page about how this started, what they want to make sure is those memories that are to be cultivated and to draw from in terms of the legacy. What were the failures that happened along the way, along with the successes? What were the biggest lessons that were learned? So that there's this way of capturing for the family all of the learning that happened as a result of building this business. And then, what were the values that motivated different decisions? And it really helps to level set for the family and look at that legacy that they're living in now. And then, what is it going to look like going forward? And that's where that piece comes in terms of, well, do we really want to sell it, or do we want to keep it in the family? And if we do, what does that mean? And if the family's got to buy it out, how we look at structuring things so that it's fair for everyone?
Mhm.
And there's a lot of different approaches to it, but it's highly recommended that you make it possible for people to have skin in the game if they want to have an ownership stake, as opposed to just giving it, because it tends to help the longevity of the business if you're going to keep it.
Well, and it's interesting because I think estate planning and exit planning of the olden days, right? 10 years, 15 years ago, was just like, we're going to put something in writing, we're going to move things to the trust, and then the patriarchy or the matriarchy dies, and everybody's like, oh my gosh, was this a good plan? Whereas what you're talking about, even the storytelling, like, that seems like a great marketing tool as well, to put, like, if you really told some of the story and get people to love it more. But you're talking about timing, and I feel like when you're coming in, it is not right when they're going to sell like immediately. It's almost, it feels like they might have to prepare for the, like, it's almost like therapy for this eventual exit. So talk to us about the timing, the transparency, the trust that goes into this. Like, this seems like a bigger endeavor, especially if there are some of those stories that haven't been resolved.
Mhm. Yeah, and it's so important to do it sooner rather than later. When a sale has happened and you haven't done that, it's just like being thrown into a whole new ocean and you've never swum before. It's just a completely new world. And you must know this from your work that there's a huge percentage of people who, after the sale, within 6 months to a year, really regret it. And it's
Mm.
because they didn't do the emotional preparation and they didn't have that new identity to live into and have that being built out in a way where it's like, oh, this is the best right thing for me and the family. And this, I'm so grateful I did it. Right. And again, it's that identity piece we talked about. And so having that sense of, okay, I'm starting to think about getting a valuation with the idea of transitioning this business one way or the other. What do I need to think about in terms of my next phase in my life, that third chapter, and starting to talk about it with the family and starting to explore that and really letting yourself dive into the emotion of what will it be like to not be going into the office in the way you used to, or to not have the role that you might have played within the community as a person who owned that business. So what other ways do you want to be relevant and engaged and having meaning and purpose in your life, way beyond the business part? And for most people that are founders, this is their purpose, right? Like, this is what they're about. And it's all about supporting themselves and the family. And then I would say the transparency piece is so huge, because when you start thinking about a sale, you typically are told not to talk about it with anyone, because
Right.
you don't want people to get wind of it. You don't want people to have it change the valuation in some way because of a competitor finding, there's so many things that are at stake. So one of the things that I recommend is, again, starting off with the stories and the background and the values, and really getting the family grounded in the meaning and purpose behind the business first. And then exploring kind of in a hypothetical way with the family, what would it look like if we were to do something? Or how would this impact us? And then how do we want to be together? And developing your code of conduct around a potential sale. And what is it that would make sense to tell who and when and how? And that's when you, like, having an owner's council can be really helpful if you've already transferred ownership. And part of the role of being an owner is being trustworthy around information that you're getting, right? And there's a board that might be part of it, and like they might have a different level of role and responsibility. And so you really need to be thinking about the degree of transparency with different people within the family structure and in the governance structures. I often recommend having a family assembly where in-laws are part of it, grandkids are part of it. And so when it's to do the reveal, you're doing it within a context where everybody's hearing it at the same time. Everybody gets a chance to ask their questions and really feel honored and respected, and setting up a really clear narrative about when and how to talk about it with anybody. Social media is a huge issue. Do we post this? Do we not? When can we? And making sure people feel really respected in terms of their role and what's required of them, and also letting them know what it means to trust them with this information. And then there's like a standard that's set for the whole family that everybody's following at the same time.
I mean, I think that is brilliant, because it's almost like all of the narratives could take a whole, like, well, I heard that Johnny was now gonna, like, I think all of these are very important things. And I think, though, that sometimes, we're doing it when somebody's getting ill, or we're doing it, later in the game. And so what you're kind of saying is, come and start it a little bit sooner. Start these, putting some of these, and again, if you go to market and you have a board of directors, you have a family council, you have, any of these things that, because not always is the second generation or the third generation going to take it further than the first generation. But now you've established that it's not solely reliant on those key people, right? Or they have maybe an outward facing role where they still get to come and hang out or come to key clients and things like that. But establishing it so that everybody understands the narrative, I think, because the moment that you hear two different narratives from two different people in an organization, it's like you almost become mistrustful of that story, like what is the true story kind of situation, right?
Oh yeah, it's probably the thing that causes the most mischief in families is when somebody tells one person one thing, doesn't tell somebody else, something else, and it could be with the best of intentions. I want to be really clear. Sometimes there's a sense of, well, I don't want you to know all the information until I have it all. We have every intention of telling you. I'm sorry you found out ahead of time, but when some people know and other people don't, it's just a recipe for those presumptions of the worst case scenarios, right? Like, why would you tell them and not me? Why would have you, have this instead? And you want to think about, okay, they must have had a positive intent in doing what they're doing. But at the same time, how do we as a family have a structure in place so that information like this is discussed, there's input from everyone, and then the decision is so much more viable, and you're not going to have those resentments, you're not going to have infighting, you're not going to have litigation when you take that time to be proactive and inclusive. And then, of course, the ultimate decision is yours, but when you include and you get that input and people feel heard and respected, they're much more likely to follow through and be reasonable in terms of, oh, we're all different people, we all have different needs. I can see why you did that with this one person, and then you did this for me, and it kind of equalizes out. Like there's a way in which you can create a narrative within the family where it does feel fair, even if it's not equal.
It seems like a much more balanced way to do, because if everyone's there, you're not going to have that same sort of negativity, right? You can just voice your concerns. Well, and because a lot of times these really strong family held businesses, that communication isn't happening to the older owners, right? Everybody's just like, well, this is what we're supposed to do. Everybody falls in line. As you then go to the next generation, if they're not backing them, that's where you get some of the issues. But to round out this conversation, you also talk a lot about crafting the family legacy. And I think that's important because I see a lot of agreements that get put into place where the intent is to gift the company to the 4 children, and 2 are in the business, 2 are outside of the business. And some people know that dad or mom wanted to continue to gift to the art museum or continue to, do something with a boys or girls group but it's not communicated. And so it almost seems arbitrary. But you take it a little bit deeper. Like, what does it look like to create that family legacy in these situations?
Well, yeah, I want to talk about that for sure. And then there's also really pragmatic things to do as well because of breakdowns in trust that can inevitably happen in families. So one of the most important things to start with is with the end in mind. So if you're doing anything where family members may be shared owners of something, there needs to be a clear, defined, everyone who's going to be an owner is agreeing to it, exit strategy, where somebody who would rather be cashed out and not be an owner has that capacity to do that. And where if somebody shows up as untrustworthy, there's an immediate way to buy them out so that they're no longer can jeopardize things. So having those things in place and having those structures in place and having everyone in the family who's being given this opportunity to be owners together understands that and agrees to it can really take care of a lot of problems in the future in either of those scenarios. And the other thing that's really important is having a family employment policy where there's clear standards for qualification to be in those roles and performance. And that also helps to allow for that legacy to continue with whoever in the family is still working there, because the other family members aren't going to this place of, oh, I don't trust them, we have to get them out. and giving them really clear sense of what the values are that drive the decisions. What are the reasons why you would do a distribution versus not? Having it be something that the whole owners council has a part in makes the biggest difference for continuing what it is that you have this created for in the first place. And then I always love wrapping those stories around things. And if you're selling the business, some of the things that people don't realize is if you have done a clean sale and you're not involved anymore, the doors are locked, the keys are changed. Like you don't get to go back in and get those pictures off the wall that you loved, or the timeline that was so important to you, and making sure that whatever stories really matter to you in terms of the family's legacy and heritage and everything that got you to the point of having this wealth now that you have from selling, you want to make sure you've captured that and collected it and done something to archive those things for future generations so that they understand everything that went into the wealth that they're getting to benefit from.
This is so like we're probably going to have an additional conversation because to me it's just the tip of the iceberg. It's the things that we're not actually dealing with because we're just coming in, let's value the business, let's put it to market, let's sell it. Where's, and then when we get in the transaction, it's like, oh, all of these things are really important and they weren't addressed. But if somebody is already watching this and wants to reach out to you, how would they work with you, or how do you typically get involved in these situations?
Oh, thank you. I do consulting and coaching, so I can help if somebody's needing to step into a leadership role. There can be some, one-on-one coaching around that, or if they're looking at, I need to deal with this identity thing, so that can be individual coaching. It can also be couples work, especially if there's a divorce that's happened, or there's the couples need to think about their future that they want to create together, but they haven't really had a lot of time together. Like there's those things. And then also the family meetings, family retreats, and then family governance, really helping them set up all these different things we've talked about so that they can be successful with it. And it's always bespoke. It's always what they need to create for themselves and their family and their unique circumstances. So it's not like I have a cookie cutter sign up for this program, because every family is so unique. And then I just, you can go on LinkedIn to find me. I'm very active there, or you can go to my website, emilybouchard.com.
Yeah, I love that. And you have a book coming out next year, The Little Book of Trust and Money. And then we're also involved in From Echo to Athena with Rochelle Khanna. And so, there's a lot of ways that they can connect with you and see things coming forward. I'd love if you came back and we kind of maybe broke this down a little bit more tangibly, because to me, it seems like almost like a year-long process to really do this. But some of these things may actually make the second and third generation better in operating the company. And it's just things that we don't talk about, like we don't talk about the emotions, we don't talk about the trust kind of situation. So I think it's been delightful. I really appreciate you. Do you have any final things that you think would be helpful for people to know about this topic?
I guess the last thing I would say is having that culture of like lifelong learning together, and recognizing that everybody's a beginner in this phase of transition. Like nobody in the family has ever done this before in this way at this time with this business. And so if you can have that open mind of like, how do we want to do this together, and come forward with that place of we've got this, we can do it in a way that's for us and that really works for our family. It can be so helpful, because you're such a authority and so much about your business and how to be successful in it, but this is a different domain. So recognizing that it's okay to be a beginner is really helpful.
Well, it's amazing, Emily. I appreciate, you got my mind going, because it's just so many areas that we don't have these conversations. So look forward to Emily coming back and maybe diving a little bit deeper into some of her ideas of how you can make the second and third generation more even successful, right? And make the legacy last longer, or get prepared for that exit so that the whole family's on board. So thank you, Emily. We really appreciate you.
Thanks, Melissa.